I got very inspired being on this jury and looking at a lot of the work and thinking, wow, you know, we shouldn't let anything get in our way, because there was so many different ways to tackle a problem, whether it's a business problem or a societal problem. And that was super inspiring to all of us.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference, even in the 160 and definitely in what we call the long list, the 80 that resulted after the first round of judging, was that there are very few traditional, what you would call a traditional ad campaign. In fact, hardly any. They were all programs. They're all, trying to build experiences. Even though there might be a TV campaign or TV commercial at the center of it, it was a total program. There was always some sort of a brand action that resulted out of that idea. That was, I don't want to say 100%, but over 90% of the shortlisted or the long-listed 80 cases were ideas like that. I think that's a definite shift.
I'd like to say, first of all, creativity is constant. This is the only competitive advantage in business today. So creativity has to be there. It is there. Yes, it is changing how we create, because the landscape of media around us is changing. The way people consume media is changing. And the way brands have to communicate to engage people is changing. So in this sense, the way we create, the way we bring ideas to life is different.
So I think that most of the cases that were awarded tend to be multi-channel, and of course that also has implications in terms of how you measure effectiveness, because there are different types of effectiveness. And I think Wendy Clark was very clear when we started and saying we're not here to discuss what is effectiveness, and I fully support her, because you could do a 6-year PhD on what effectiveness is in advertising or communications and still not really get there in the end. I mean, I think the effectiveness depends on the objectives you set. So I think that the jury was quite keen to say, what are the papers where the objectives are clear and where we deliver clearly with regards to the objectives.
So my overall impression from looking at 160 papers is that creative effectiveness is alive and well. Last year, coming out of the Effectiveness Awards, I think there was a sense that we'd got to separate efficiency from effectiveness. So impact of buzz and social media versus the impact from sales and behaviour change. And I think this year, everybody's got that. So the commonality this year was really about the balance between for-profit and not-for-profit campaigns, and how we manage that, and how we assess effectiveness metrics on for-profit versus effectiveness metrics on not-for-profit. So that was where the challenge lay, and I think our jury wasn't different to many others in that respect.
So I think the first trend was, or the first observation was, disappointment. About 4,000 entries are eligible to enter the Cannes Creative Effectiveness. Okay, 4,000 entries that were either a shortlist or winners last year. And from 4,000, we only had 160 cases. Okay, now the Cannes Creative Effectiveness line is probably the one line every client and every agency should win. So the fact that we only had 160 cases is a bit disappointing.
Creativity does work. It does impact. It gets people's attention. It makes people want to engage with something. So, and you don't need to spend as much on media if the work is standing out and cutting through. So it's just it was very exciting that what many of us felt was the most creative piece of work. Also, I mean, the effects on the business were remarkable.
Yes, effectiveness has more layers today, because we see. Obviously, we look at commercial results when it comes to for-profit campaigns, but we also look at a lot of data that is available today that illustrates behavior, that illustrates attitude of people, that illustrates engagement of crowds with the brand. So there are more layers to how you look at effectiveness.
It's interesting. We had a really interesting debate, again, back to the whole not-for-profit and for-profit. And the reason that I think we debated that a bit was we debated this cause. Because if you're, let's say, you're either doing organ transplants or, children's cancer, we had an entry about, which is just heartbreaking, right? They're not going to spend money on metrics because any money they make should be going back to that cause. You know, you can imagine that, and so therefore you might not have the metrics to see, quote unquote, how traditionally effective is it. So I think we just have to, and we challenged ourselves to think outside of that and to look at, again, virality, shares, involvement levels. When people get behind something, they get very involved in it as a metric of effectiveness. So not just the usual stuff of, like, you know, again, big brand, expensive brands, big trackers that they pay for. We didn't necessarily have those metrics in some of the winners, and I think that's important. So it does change it.